The piece of software that most podcasters overlook when they're planning their show is not what they're editing with, not what they're recording into, but it is what they're hosting their show with. And the reason that hosting is important is because without hosting software, you can't be on most of the audio platforms that actually exist. So let's talk about how this works when you record a podcast. So you're going to record, let's say with Zoom or something like Riverside. Then you edit with, let's say, something like Riverside, and then you need to publish it to, assuming you want it to be on Apple Podcasts, you want it to be on Spotify, you want it to be on all the top directories that are constantly coming out. Then of course, you might even, if you have a video version, you want it to be on YouTube. YouTube is the only place that we're going to treat a little bit differently compared to all of the audio platforms that exist. When I first started podcasting in 2016, I was using Libsyn, and the first couple shows that I did, the clients that I worked with, I got them to use Libsyn as well. But the problem that occurred with Libsyn was that it got very expensive very quick, because if you are not using the MP3 file and you're using the WAV file, which is larger memory, but maybe let's say higher quality, the way that Libsyn charges is actually based on memory. I don't know if they still do that, but that is what made me migrate all of my clients and myself over to Buzzsprout. So Buzzsprout, one of my other clients, was using that originally. And so I got to kind of test it while I was working with them. And I was like, wow, this is really nice. And it's way cheaper than something like Libsyn. And the reason for that is because Buzzsprout is focused on hours and time versus actual memory. So instead of saying, oh, you get, 500 megabytes per month, you basically get 4 hours per month, right? And that is a more like, you can upload WAV files directly into that with no issue because there's no cap on memory. Now, the common theme with how these hosting services work is that you basically sign up through Libsyn or Buzzsprout, and then you get to distribute to all audio directories and platforms through there. So when you want to publish your stuff on Spotify, you're not accessing Spotify like it is a Instagram app and then just publishing it to there. You might, we'll talk about that, that's an option, but really what you're doing is going to this hub, this central place. Any changes you make to the audio file or any changes you make to your description, you do this in this one place and it kind of gets pushed out everywhere because of the RSS feed. Of course, the other thing that you have is detailed analytics and all these things that allow it to be more useful than some of the other platforms that are offering free versions. Now, what I'd say has kind of evolved or changed over the past couple of years, and I would say Anchor is the software that began this, right? Anchor, which Spotify eventually bought, was kind of the tool that popularized recording a podcast from your phone. It was an app, you recorded directly into it, and it just got uploaded to all the feeds directly from that app. Similarly, you've got places like Substack, for example. Substack is free to write on. And one of the things that they offer is being able to upload your podcast directly through Substack. The other thing is Spotify. So Spotify later on launched that, hey, if you want to upload video podcasts, then you have to host through us, right? You have to publish it through Spotify. You're not going to be able to, publish it into Buzzsprout and then it gets pushed out to Spotify. Now, this was of course only for the video feature, but it was really an incentive to get people to come over to Spotify and host with them and publish with them. And so this is becoming a common theme where, the bigger services that can provide a trustworthy hosting service are adding this as an extra feature on top of some of the other things that you might get already. A great example of this is actually Riverside. So Riverside started out as a purely podcast recording platform. The way that you use Zoom, the higher quality version of that is Riverside. But over time, now there's a full editor inside there, right? Where you can just use it to edit as well. And the latest addition that they've added is hosting. So of course you can do so many things all in one with Riverside. It makes total sense that they would add on a hosting capability that would incentivize you to come host with them and just do everything in one place. Now, the benefit of some of these different providers that are offering this feature is that it's free, right? It's not something that you have to pay extra for like you would with Libsyn or Buzzsprout or these different podcast hosting services. That is primarily what they do. But there's also some cons to this that I want to go over and make sure that you're aware of before you choose that. So an example with Riverside is that only new podcasts at this moment are able to be hosted through there. So if you already have a show, the way that I migrated from Libsyn to Buzzsprout, I can't go from Buzzsprout to Riverside right now. I'm sure that is something that's going to open up in the future, and it will be pretty easy to do that. But because this feature is so fresh and new, it is something that is only available to new shows that are starting. So if you haven't actually launched your show yet, starting and sticking with Riverside might be a worthwhile option. I normally discourage people from using something like that because I always prefer having a, robust software like Buzzsprout. And because some of the places that offer the free stuff, like it's not that great, or you're not getting, as much all-in-one ease of use as you normally do. For example, if you, let's say, publish your podcast through Substack's hosting, okay, you might get an RSS feed, but now all of those new directories that pop up, like you want to push it to Amazon, you want to push it to Pocket Casts, Overcast, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's not guaranteed that this is all connected. Like every one has their own rules with how they do that. So you might get the RSS feed, but then you got to go manually publish to Spotify, manually publish to Apple Podcasts when you initially launch your show. That's personally why I like Buzzsprout, is because when you hit the directories section and you're launching your show, it literally is a one-click process for a bunch of different directories. And as there are new apps that pop up and people are listening to, for example, Pocket Cast, I've never used it, right? I didn't think people listened to that. But I had people request from me, hey, could you get your podcast available on Pocket Cast? And that's how I realized there's enough people actually using this as their main podcast player. And so it allows you to be in these different places for free. There's no extra cost to be listed on some of these directories. It's just, do you have the time to, do that one-time setup and submit it through their portal? Because certain shows, like let's say iHeartRadio or, Apple Podcasts, for example, you do have to go through their portal, and there's a couple extra steps when you initially set up your show. But the reason that I'm confident that Riverside is probably going to, in the long term, solve this issue is because Riverside is so invested in the podcasting community already. They're serving podcasters in the form of this fully robust editor, in the form of being able to record and stream all from this one piece of software, being able to create clips from there. And so I'm pretty confident that they are invested enough in this to really develop the hosting feature. Versus, I would say something like Substack, I don't know. I'm not positive if they're going to push that further, because to me, it seems like, the way Substack is using it is just to basically allow it to be all in one, right? If you are already, writing a newsletter there, you'll start your podcast there. Or if you decide, oh, maybe I'll publish my podcast here, like you're more incentivized to use their other features of maybe publishing notes or writing articles. Now, the reason this is important and worthwhile to think about is because it's a one-time decision. You don't want to be constantly switching and migrating where you are hosting, right? Because basically one of the benefits is the way that it registers your downloads. You can see your stats, you can see which directories, which players it came from, what devices it was viewed on, what locations are your listeners in. All of these tiny details, I find Buzzsprout had a very, very robust analytics and stats portal. So for example, with something like Substack, there might be a bit of a trade-off there, right? Like, okay, it clocks all the stuff that's coming through Substack, but then maybe to go check everything that came from Apple, I got to go to the Apple's portal. And so those are some of the tiny trade-offs that you will make when it comes to using something that is free. Now, the pricing for Buzzsprout is going to range in between $12 to $18 per month. And this just depends on how many hours you're actually utilizing. You get 4 hours a month if you are on the $12 per month tier as of now. And so That to me is a worthwhile investment for all of the, headache-free analytics that I get and the ability to push everything out from one central location. Now, if you can invest the 12 to 18 bucks a month, I think Buzzsprout is the winner and worth it for sure. But I find myself, as I'm consulting with clients day in and day out and helping them with this, recommending Riverside more and more, because again, it's a new feature. It's something I am betting they're going to develop more and more. And it is something that saves you a fixed cost of 12 to 18 bucks a month. So the RSS feed is the main thing. If you have that link, you can basically take that and use it to push yourself onto any new directory that comes out. Because there's not new directories coming out every single day. I mean, it happens often, but not like every day. It's the kind of thing that you may not mind manually submitting to something like Pocket Casts or, Overcast if you actually needed to. As long as Apple, Spotify, the main ones are covered, you might not really care. And in that case, you might like Riverside's hosting or Substack's hosting, and that might work perfectly fine for you. Now, I want to address how YouTube fits into this whole hosting thing, because YouTube is the one platform that you've got video and it's kind of its own thing, right? And until they added the actual podcast feature and tab and announced that they were integrating that with YouTube Music, it basically was just like uploading a regular video. You uploaded the video version to YouTube and published it just like a normal YouTuber would publish a video. What's cool is with YouTube's new podcast tab and feature, you can use the RSS feed link that I just talked about and connect it into your YouTube so that basically every time a new episode drops, you basically will automatically have the audio version pushed out to YouTube as well. Now, the thing to keep in mind with YouTube is that you can either, one, use the RSS feed method and just connect it once and it will automatically push out the new episodes, or what you can do is manually just upload episode by episode as if you are publishing a normal YouTube video. I personally prefer the manual upload method where I upload it to YouTube as a video file and then under playlists, I check the podcast playlist and then it automatically gets connected into that whole tab and playlist. And then the audio version gets pushed out into YouTube Music. Linking up your RSS feed to the podcast playlist on YouTube is probably a worthwhile way to go. So that's just something to keep in mind is the hosting software you use typically will push out to all of the dominant audio platforms. Anything that has video incorporated into it, that is going to take some manual effort. If you're trying to upload a video podcast to Spotify, you gotta, at this time, go and host through Spotify. Eventually it will open up and I'm sure they will make it accessible. But for now, they're making it so you're incentivized to go host with them and be in their ecosystem if you want access to that feature. And then same thing for YouTube. I recommend publishing it manually as an episode versus relying on your hosting software to do that. Before you watch this, it's pretty normal to see podcast hosting as this complicated, mystical thing. But once you understand it, you realize it's nothing crazy. And a lot of it is just one-time setup, right? Once you do that initially for your launch, and then once your show is actually out there, it's something you don't even think about too much, right? It's kind of just a part of your workflow and process. So I hope this makes more sense now. And I hope it helps you make a more informed decision when it comes to which podcast hosting software you're going to go with. Make sure to check out the links in the description below. You can try out Riverside and test that if you'd like. They offer a free trial. And if you use my code Pod Mahal, you can get 15% off any pro plan. Appreciate you for hanging out. Thanks so much, and I will see you on the next one.